This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. It's the show about sports that we started during a global sports shutdown, then that ended, and it sure looks like there's about to be another one. I'm Geoff Brault alongside Dr. Keith Strudler, the director of the School of Communication and Media, Montclair State University. Our producer is Mike Wallace. And for those of you watching us on the For the Fans network, as we premiere midnight on Wednesday, or as some people might call it, Thursday, we need to apologize to you. Because Keith, who has spent untold thousands of dollars trying to improve his appearance through the most expensive webcams money can buy, has run through two of them and is back on the same built-in laptop camera that he started with.
Yeah, I currently have 3 webcams in my house. I have one that I've settled on that seems like it's working perfectly. And if you enjoyed the show last week, you're welcome. But that's because I have fine-tuned the clarity and granularity and precision of my shot. Well, guess what happened last week? My computer crashed. And when I say my computer, I mean the computer that work allows me to use, because that's the computer I have. So that's now in the shop. Who knows when it's going to come out? They said it was going to be ready today. Is it ready today? Does it look like I'm on that computer? I guess, to be fair, how would you know?
It does look like you're on that computer. You always look exactly the same. Every week you come on, you tell us about the new lights you bought, the new camera that you bought, and you always look exactly the same.
So I tried to plug in my microphone and my webcam, and for whatever reason, this camera will only take one, or this computer only takes one of the inputs. So you're either going to see me a little clearly or you're going to hear me a little bit better. Obviously, I had to go with the audio, so I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a bad mood because I don't have my computer, and I'm in a bad mood because I can't get the webcam. And the webcam's literally staring me in the face right now. It's staring me in the face. I'm looking right at it. So it's bothering me. And you know what I'm going to do? I'll show work. I'll show them at IT. I'm going to buy my own computer. I'm going to go out, buy and spend. You think what I've spent so far on this show is a lot? Wait till you see this mega machine, the supercomputer I haul into our house and build into a closet. I'm going to buy a new computer so I don't ever have to use that computer again. I don't have to steal things from work for my side hustle. By the way, I'd like to welcome our live studio audience, the cat, who has joined us once again.
Yeah, our loyal listeners know all about Mia. So 2 questions. First, do you think there's any other programs where the hosts have to buy their own equipment? Like, do you think there's like ESPN anchors before SportsCenter goes on where they're like, hold on, I just got these new lights from Amazon?
It's almost like a Ponzi scheme, right? You could be on this, you can have a show on this network. However, we're going to need you to invest in my cousin's technology company. It'll cost you $5,000. I don't know. I mean, well, how about this? Do you think if someone really successful, let's take a Willie Geist or someone of that, who's doing a show out of his house at this point, do you think at some point he's like, I'm just going to go out and buy it myself? Or you get to a point where they're just sending you stuff all the time?
They're sending you stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's what I figure. So I guess the answer to that is no.
Second question. Why can't you hook up the webcam to this loaner computer?
I don't know. There's 2 USB ports, but it's almost as if one is just to mock me. I mean, and it does seem like they both work, but it doesn't seem like they want to work at the same time. I don't know. If I were good at computer IT, do you think I'd still be in the job I'm in? If I had that skill set? If I knew what a carburetor was, do you think I'd be in my job right now? I mean, there are a lot of things I could do. So I have zero. I don't even know how a computer works. Let's be clear. You open.
So this leads me to one of my favorite questions of all time. Yep. Let's say time travel existed, right? And you could only go back in time. You couldn't go forward, but you could go back in time from present day with all the knowledge that you currently have.
I would not be able to progress that society one step.
And that's what I'm going to say. So if you go back 200 years, right, you know all about how the telephone works and how the car works and how the airplane works and how the internet works. Could you do anything with that knowledge?
And the worst part is not only could I not help them, they will then think you're absolutely clinically insane because you're like, oh, in my future, you just open up a box and you can see someone 1,000 miles away and you can hear them clear as day. When you cannot present even a diagram of how that might operate. No, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble. I couldn't even make a calculator. I don't even think I could produce fire. I think if they took me back far enough.
Do you want to know what humbles me intellectually? And I think will humble anyone intellectually if you think about it. How does a telephone work?
I mean, like an old one with the dial or
how does a telephone work?
Well, you talk into it. Someone talks back. And then but I mean, if the question is like, so this thing, so where like the waves, like, how does it go out?
how does it work?
How does it go? It's a good question. It's a great question.
Doesn't that humble you a little bit?
No one knows.
But like, think of all the things that you take for granted. Like, how does it work? Every time I walk through JFK Airport, they have in Terminal 5 anyway, they have like a little museum exhibit about how an airplane works. And I've probably looked at it 100 times. And every time I look at it, I go, oh yeah, that's how.
Well, I'll be quite honest. I try not to, and I've been on an airplane for quite some time. You don't want to start thinking about what keeps this, multi-ton toothpaste tube up in the air. Like, just when you look at it and you're like, well, something's coming out of those engines and there's wings, but it seems to defy logic that we're still floating. I try not to think about those things. So I'm salty because I'm having to deal with a loaner computer. I don't have my favorite webcam, which I enjoy. And so I'm just, and I'm also, let's be clear, while I'm excited because the Gators posted a huge win on Saturday, I believe that may have been the only SEC game that was allowed to play. So, and by the way, it looks like who knows what's going to happen this week as we record this. There's already one man out for SEC for this weekend. Texas A&M will not be playing this weekend because of corona-related issues in the program.
Yeah.
So I think they have a culture issue right now.
Yeah. I think on Monday night, which is when we record this program, there's already been, I think, 6 Power 5 games canceled. And it's Monday night. A little bit later, we're going to talk about sports and politics, specifically as it relates to Tommy Tuberville, the former coach at Auburn, being elected to the Senate. But first, I started the program by saying it feels like we're headed toward another sports shutdown. We started this podcast in April, right on the heels of the NCAA tournament being canceled when absolutely everything was over because we didn't understand how coronavirus works. It's now November, what should be the first week of college basketball season. College basketball should have started last weekend. It obviously did not. The earliest it can start is November 25th. However, boy, it doesn't really feel like that's going to happen.
No, especially when you have kind of leading voices. I understand Rick Pitino is no longer kind of a major Power 5 coach anymore, but he still is kind of a senior authoritative voice. When he, a couple of weeks before they're about to start, basically says, why don't we start talking about May Madness? That does not instill confidence. So, the Ivy Leagues have already said they're not playing. You'll probably see several other schools say that as well. It almost seems like we're fooling ourselves. Like we've convinced ourselves that we are going to play. I know a lot of schools are trying to do scrimmages. Those get canceled all the time because of virus related issues. I don't know. I do feel like this would be a good time instead of pretending. So, I mean, our teams now, are they scheduled out to start playing on the 25th, 26th? Is that
some are, some aren't. A lot of games have been canceled.
You also have to realize most schools at that point will have been sent home. So most students, there'll be very few college students in the country that return to campus after Thanksgiving. So that may change the calculus one way or another. We would assume the basketball players are now stuck kind of alone on a deserted college campus. So maybe that's part of the plan, but I do not know. And someone has to explain this to me, how they are going to get basketball teams across the country and back. Right. Playing indoor. I mean, when it even defies almost, I mean, in New Jersey now, you're not allowed to have more than 10 people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you really got to go 5-on-5, call your own fouls.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that in the context, especially like what's going on in Michigan, where Michigan's essentially going back into quarantine. And the governor in New Jersey did say, he's like, we could go back in a second.
Because, my favorite line with the governor of New Jersey is like, what's really inconvenient? Dying. Great line.
So, we're kind of on the razor's edge. And I do think, you bring up the point about waiting for most students to leave for Thanksgiving break. I do think that's what folks are expecting to allow basketball to go on. The fact that they will be able to create kind of this almost bubble. But here's the problem with almost bubbles. They don't work. No. There's too many people coming in from the outside or having contact with people that are in the quasi bubble, whether it's the spouses of coaches, whether it's the bus driver that's getting them from game to game, whether it's the people that are required to run a game, the people on the scorer's table and the broadcast crews, whatever. There's just too many people and there's too much contact. And you can do your best to try to say, all right, players, you can't leave. But how is that logical? If they can't go to the grocery store, if they can't go and get a breakfast sandwich, how can you make those mandates so that you can play a college basketball game in an empty gym, which, by the way, it may not even matter?
Yeah, and I was going to say, it just takes one midnight run to In-N-Out Burger, and that's the end of that quarantine. I mean, it's and these are college students who are now. I mean, anyone who was a college athlete that played through a winter season, and so indoor track obviously was a winter season, you'd always come back early. Like you go home for a couple of weeks and then you come back early for training and you have a couple meets back before anyone gets on campus. It is the eeriest, weirdest time. Yeah. So we'd be on the Cornell campus and it was just you and your track buddies hanging out on campus, training. Like you had absolutely no schoolwork. You had absolutely nothing to do. It was very hard to have any kind of job. You'd run in the morning, you go up to the track. I mean, our biggest challenge was trying not to hurt each other because, we'd be like, oh, it'd be fun today. Let's have a wrestling tournament. Like you would just come up with stupid ideas. Let's go sledding down the hill in our pajamas. Like you'd find things to kill the time. So that's what they're expecting these athletes to go through now, basically for months, and to not fill the time with things to do. I mean, there's no way. It's not, at some point, it's just not fair to the athletes either. It's not fair to have athletes who are not getting compensated, not reasonably, one might suggest, just sitting in their rooms waiting to play a game against San Diego State. I mean, it's good for us because we can watch it, but it doesn't make sense. It's probably not going to work. As the virus numbers go up, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You heard it here first. It's not going to work. By the way, I brought up In-N-Out Burger. I just want to get this plug in. I know you're going to be excited about this. McDonald's soon to come out with a plant-based burger and chicken sandwich.
So I don't know if I've said this. I've actually tried the Beyond Burger, and I was blown away by how good it was.
It's delicious.
Blown away. I am a card-carrying carnivore.
I know. You're a murderer. You're literally a murderer. Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. So, in fact, I believe I've even said for every animal you don't eat, I will eat 3 to make up the difference. And I've tried the Beyond Burger, and it's really good. I do think it's the future of food.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's Beyond, there's Impossible, and the range of chicken products. Like there are all of these products now that are coming out that are, I mean, at some point, if you're not eating these products, it's just because you'd rather slaughter the cow. It's like you're standing on ceremony at some point. They're getting pretty good. They're getting quite good. So yeah, this is not your grandmother's veggie burger. This is legit. It's red. It's delicious. It's not that healthy either, if it makes you feel any better.
That does actually make me feel better. Yeah. That's good. I don't want to improve this situation at all. Here's a moment that I think we're heading toward. So in the middle of November, before college basketball season has started, there's still a lot of excitement from coaches, a lot of excitement from players. Sure. They still want to play right now.
And they can remember they got robbed of their season. Of last year. So They're very excited.
And everybody in the world wants to get back to some kind of normality in whatever way, shape, or form it might look like. If you lost something because of this pandemic, you want to get it back. But I wonder how that's going to look a month after the season starts, when players are realizing they're doing all this and they're playing 3 minutes a game, when programs have started the season 0-6 and they realize that, oh boy, we're not that good. And they're making all these sacrifices for another 3 months. And now suddenly the idea of a reward is gone away. The idea of we're going to compete, we're going to win, we're going to get to the NCAA tournament, we're eligible for championship. I wonder what that's going to do to the psychology of the athletes that are in these quasi bubbles that are being asked to sacrifice going home to see their families for Christmas in order to play these college basketball games.
And I imagine you're also not even getting the immediate rewards of, hey, there's a lot of fans in the stands that are cheering for him. I mean, that's what you play for, right? I mean, you play for the fans. As much as that sounds silly, anyone who's ever been in front of a group of fans and they start cheering for you. I mean, this sounds hokey. The difference, if we were to track meet and the track was lined and people were yelling, it didn't hurt anymore. You were like, this isn't so bad. And so you take that away. I'm actually impressed that the football players that have played in relatively empty stadiums are able to play with the intensity that they do. Yeah, and football is a little bit different because you kind of have this band of brothers thing where there's, 50 or 60 of you and you're kind of playing for each other. I agree. If you are, I mean, when Cornell canceled their basketball, with all due respect to Andy Knoll, of course, we were like, I'm sure they're really disappointed. Like we can't go 5-22 this year. Like, what can we do?
You bring up a great point because the way college basketball is going to have to be played this year takes away all of the perks of high-level college basketball. Playing in Cameron Indoor Stadium with no one in it is not that much different than playing at the YMCA. Right. Walking into your home arena and not having any fans in it and not getting the kind of societal clout or the feeling of, I'm the big man on campus. Everybody comes to watch me play. When that goes away, you're just playing a bunch of scrimmages. And then you start to think about all the things that you're sacrificing in order to do that. And I wonder if people are going to start doing the calculus and wondering if it's worth it, especially because you have to consider this. Nobody loses any eligibility this year, no matter what year you are in college basketball. You get the year back and free transfers. So if you're a freshman and you're homesick and you're staring at 5 minutes a game, why not just go home? Yeah. You get the year back. You can go somewhere else. Like, are you really going to gut it out? Is that really going to be worth it to you?
It's a good year for walk-ons, I'll tell you that. I've always wanted to play college basketball. No,
and keeping in mind, you are one positive test away from being shut down for 14 days.
Yeah. And then you're stuck in a room and your only cardio is push-ups. That's like being in a prison cell. Right. So it is a long haul for anyone who's on a college campus right now. And I know, look, I work at a university. We're all trying. Like I don't, with the exception of Clemson and maybe Notre Dame, I think every school is like, we're doing the best we can, right? We're trying to balance fiscal needs with trying to have some in-person instruction. We're doing the best we can. But I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of college students. I know a lot of college students, friends like friends' kids who are doing this residential thing. No one's happy. Like no one's like, this is a great experience. Everyone's miserable. The only ones that are happy are the kids who kind of formed pods and went to another city. Like that's like the hip thing to do, right? Where like you get like, so if you go to NYU, you get your friends and you go live in like Boulder, Colorado. You rent a place and you put a flag up that says NYU in front, and that's your little pod, and you just take all your online classes out there. This is like the cool thing to do for hipster kids now. So if you're an urban campus, like if you go to University of Iowa, you go to Manhattan right now, you go to Brooklyn, right? If you can figure that out. So that
I will say Iowa City is a sleeper town. Iowa City's a great little spot. So let's not be hating on the University of Iowa.
I'm just saying, I know people from, I think one of the Ivies that went down to Chapel Hill because they were like, we've always wanted to hang out in Chapel Hill. So they got to play. And it's easy to get apartments now. Like you want an apartment in Brooklyn, you can find one.
Yeah.
Right.
They're giving you free rent for like 4 or 5 months. It's great.
By the time they track you down, you're out.
Speaking of potting, this is how you know that the college basketball season is in peril. The NCAA has announced that the men's tournament will be played at one site. So you talk about the things that you talk about the things you're losing. You're already losing an NCAA tournament with fans. Now you're losing an NCAA tournament with travel. Mm-hmm. And not only is the NCAA tournament, at least on the men's side, going to be played at one site, that one site is Indianapolis.
It's not good.
In a country in which Miami exists, New Orleans exists, Las Vegas exists, Los Angeles exists.
If they wanted to
Indianapolis?
If they wanted to ensure, apparently the Dakotas were not available, although the Dakota's not looking particularly safe right now. If they wanted to ensure that the athletes were not tempted by the spoils of the town they were playing with, they went like the opposite of the Super Bowl, where the Super Bowl goes to they do the New Orleans, San Diego, Miami swing. They went for a little bit less exciting. So I guess They're going to shove now. How many teams? Let's play this out.
Okay.
How many teams do you think they could even do? I mean, how is this going to work? Are they going to be playing? I guess they'll be playing in gyms. They'll be playing in gyms.
They say 68 teams full field.
Where they go and they take over like Butler and IUPUI and all these different places. And they just
exactly
play it
right. You got Butler, IUPUI. You got where the Pacers play downtown, whatever that's called now. And then there's a bunch of smaller schools that they claim they can take a full field. And by the way, now the threshold to getting into that field is now all of a sudden thrown into question because we were all operating under the assumption that you had to get 13 games under your belt to be postseason eligible. NCAA also announces that that's flexible. There will be waivers that you can apply for if you don't get to 13.
So at this point, if I'm Duke, if I'm Kentucky, I stop playing. I say
1-0. You just got to get to 1-0.
But I mean, I challenge the committee to not let Duke into the tournament when they are going to be starving for ratings. I challenge them to not let them in.
But here's another thing to consider. You talked about Florida football. Looks like Florida's going to be in the SEC championship game, assuming the SEC can get there. You know who they got on the schedule this week? Vanderbilt.
Sure.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's 0-6. Why is Vanderbilt still playing? Like, in what world why is Vanderbilt still playing?
Because they like playing. I mean, look, they do like playing football. Like most guys who play college football, they like playing. But what are they going to roll over and just give?
How is the value proposition of that? How is the safety proposition of that now for Vanderbilt? How is it worth it?
Well, there's never been the safety proposition has never been worth it. I mean, it's want
to kind of worth it if you have a chance to win a national championship.
Yes, I suppose it's more worth it. It's more worth it. You watch, this is the plight though. You watch Florida lose this game. You watch. You watch there. By the way, how bad? I mean, is this season just silly too, though? How bad is Michigan and Penn State? Like, what's going on? Yeah. They're awful.
Who knows? I mean, who knows? It could. It's such an odd, silly, solly season. Like, who knows if it's because of the environment or who knows if it's because they were going to be bad anyway.
Do you after a season like this, do you make personnel changes? Although Muschamp is out at South Carolina, so I guess yes.
I mean, you brought up Michigan. Do they make personnel changes? Who knows? I mean, buyout, but I mean, look at these buyouts that are in some of these contracts. Are these schools in a position? It used to be we'll find a booster to pay. Who's in position to drum up this kind of money to switch football coaches? I
mean, you really can't. At that point, you're like, look, we're going to buy out our football coach, and we're also going to dump our tennis team, our swimming program. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah.
or maybe you just give it to them. Like instead of paying them out, like, hey, Harbaugh, you now own the squash program. We're giving that to you. All the gear, the crew team too. You can coach
other duties as assigned.
So I don't know how it's going to be very, I can only imagine the angst and the vitriol and the protest if a school like Michigan pays out a coach tens of millions of dollars during an economic crisis when students are cash strapped, right? And they're cutting. I mean, I can't imagine that being something that would go over well. So I'm guessing they're going to have a really hard time making that work.
And especially you look at the state of Michigan, where their governor has essentially put quarantine restrictions back in place, essentially saying, indoor dining at restaurants is out. High school sports can't happen.
Yeah.
But there is an exemption in Michigan for NCAA and pro sports. Why? If you're putting all these restrictions in place to essentially keep people safe, why then on the other side of the coin are NCAA sports and pro sports exempt? How can these two things happen at the same time?
They're not supposed to, but I think this is a fairly widespread kind of way of doing this, that universities have largely been exempt from kind of everything. I mean, that's true. Even that number of people you're allowed to have in a room, right? So all the things that are happening kind of grand scale, restaurants, clubs, bowling alleys, you name it, businesses, they're not being applied to universities. Some of that is political pressure from the college presidents. Some of that is the existential crisis that a lot of the universities are like, look, we'll follow your rules. We will then shut down or we'll.
Right. So, well, all of the COVID rules in America are all based on economics.
Sure.
Because unlike the European countries that have been able to actually shut down, it's not just Europe, of course, like Australia did the same way. They have safety nets in place where they can compensate people not to go to work, not to open their businesses,
sure,
so that they can stay afloat. Whereas here, that doesn't exist. So we're making these decisions based on how do you keep things open as safely as possible, as opposed to how do you make the safest possible decision.
Sure. To be fair, Europe's not doing so well either.
No, they're not. But a spike from a very low plateau, you know, when you talk about these things in real numbers, one of the weirdest things about this is we talk about it in percents. People are like, well, it's fine for 99% of people. I'm like, yeah, but that's like a million people. Like when you look at the real numbers versus the percent, it's a heck of a lot different.
The percent's a frightening number. You're like, look, if 99% of the people are going to be fine, but there are 300 million people. So
right.
So that's 3 million dead. So that's not a good number. It's not a good number. You know what country seems to be doing well? And it came up because of the Olympics. Japan, apparently. You can. Oh yeah,
I believe. I've heard that though. Japan, South Korea. I don't know about North Korea. South Korea doing fine.
We actually haven't gotten data.
We have not heard. No.
I bet you there's not a lot. This is a real sidebar. I bet you there's not a lot. They don't travel. They're not going anywhere. It's hard to get the virus in and out. They're kind of an island.
I mean, I think they're just disciplined. Like I think
North Korea. I'm just talking about North Korea. I was talking
about like Japan and all those countries. No. Like I think they're willing to follow the rules and have the discipline to see it through. And
they are. Yeah. They are. They're also not. Also, 50% of them are not diabetic. So there's that as well. There's that.
They got a head start.
So they have a little bit healthier lifestyle. But they wear the masks. They follow the rules. And they do not let people in. You can't get into Japan. I mean, it's not.
It's true. I actually remember maybe it was, I don't know, May, June, somewhere back then. I received an airfare alert for a $400 round trip flight to Tokyo.
You got to take that.
And I was, and obviously, you know, before you start to think about why that's not possible, you're like, well, I'd like to look into this. That seems like an awfully good deal. And to get to Tokyo from America, you would have to first fly through Canada, where Americans aren't allowed. And then you would connect to Tokyo, where, shockingly, also Americans aren't allowed. So great deal if you were a Japanese citizen needing to get home to Japan. Otherwise, a deal wasn't accessible to you. And really, I didn't need that excitement to then immediately have my hopes dashed. So I frown upon the airline that sent me that email. I'm not a fan.
I will. Well, it's a Canadian Air. It sounds like Air Canada. They wouldn't
it was Japan Air, but the connecting flight was through Toronto.
I'll tell you what, that's a kick in the pants when you've got a really long flight.
Yep.
And they make you start off with like a 1 hour puddle jumper to kind of get
it's terrible. Yeah. But we're spoiled, right? Living in the New York City metro area.
Sure.
For some people, that's every flight.
No,
there are some people who their airport goes to 3 places.
No, and I grew up in Houston. Houston is a great hub city.
Yep.
Right. Houston's a fantastic hub. You know, you got a certain number of cities. Like you obviously have the New York, and where I live right now, I'm surrounded by airplanes. I mean, it's luxurious. You know, when you're in Northern Jersey, you really are equidistant from just all of these wonderful airlines. I mean, and I could still, if I wanted to, I'm not that far from Stewart. I'm 30-something minutes from Stewart if I wanted. Granted, nothing's happened at Stewart. I believe that's
nothing
done. It's over. So that will be a raceway at some point. But it's a total kick in the pants though, when you're like, oh, can't wait to go to Hawaii, but first we got to go to Montreal. I just find that to be awful. And when people always hunt for fares, they hunt for fares. Yeah. I've gotten in trouble in my house for being like, hey, I bought our tickets and 3 stops.
Oh no, never. Oh no. That's the worst. What's have multiple stops.
How much? So, all right, let's game theory this now. Okay. So, ticket to, let's say, I don't know, where's someplace you want to go? A European city. Where would you want to go?
A European city that I'd like to go to? London. We'll say London. Keep it simple.
Have you been to London?
I've never been to Europe.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Speaking of things the coronavirus has taken from us, if I can complain for a second, in the before times, about 14 days from right now, I would have been working basketball games in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and London. So Thanks a lot for that not getting to happen.
That takes you down a notch a little bit.
I'd like to go.
Not been to Europe.
I've been very fortunate to get to see a lot of America. I'm at 42 American states, but I've never been over. I've never been over to Europe.
I would trade about 50. I'd trade 20 of those states for one European visit. I think that's fair.
I believe me, I will get there. It's not like it's some like aversion I have to Europe. I think I'd like Europe quite a bit. I just haven't had the occasion to go.
I'm surprised. It brings you down from a culture perspective ever so slightly. I mean, it's a differentiator between you and I.
There are reasons why I haven't been able to go because of the jobs that I've had in my life. They don't offer you a lot of time where you can go and spend, weeks in Europe at the time.
It's been weeks.
It's been a week. Weeks in Europe.
It's been a week.
Sure. A week. Sure. You know the last time I had a whole week off? Oh, it was 14 years ago.
You don't have a lot going on right now. You could get a week.
This year I can't go. How cruel is that? The one time in 15 years I could go to Europe, I can't go to Europe.
You're making excuses. You could get to Europe. So Europe is lovely. All right. So let's
No,
so London.
You can't. Americans can't get to Europe.
No, not right now. You can't. So let's talk about London. All right.
Okay.
So London's a great town. I like London a lot. That would be a good starter for you. It would be a good starter because the language not a barrier.
There are a lot of European cities I don't want to go to. There really are.
I could name a few.
I'd like to go to the south of France. I think that'd be great. I've heard some wonderful things about German cities, especially like mid-sized German cities. I've heard Brussels is really cool, and Belgium.
Of course, you're picking all the best cities.
Italy,
you're picking all the best cities.
I need around Belgium. I'd love to go to Croatia. I've heard that's beautiful.
You're picking all like Venice is a giant toilet. I mean, so let's.
I didn't say Venice. Like to do the wine region in Tuscany.
Of course, you're picking all the best places.
Why would I go to the bad places?
I'd like to stay at the Four Seasons in Rome. Like I would do that. Like you're picking everything. It's great.
Why would I want to go to the bad places? Nobody's out here like I've heard Warsaw's nice this time of year. Even though honestly, I bet Warsaw's pretty cool. I don't know why I'm picking on it.
Yeah, Warsaw's on my list actually. I wouldn't mind that. Poland's on my list. So I think there's been enough time. Enough time has passed. I'm ready. Although it did.
Forgive and forget. All right. So let's say I want to go to London. What's your thing?
So let's say it's an $800 ticket normally, $600, but you got to fly through Miami first. You got to go all the way down south and then they fly you.
No, pay the extra $200.
$400.
It's 50% off to fly to Miami first. I would fly to Miami first, and here's why. I'd spend a couple days in Miami.
No, you can't do it. You got, same day travel. They got to do same day. They're not letting you. This is not one of those special.
To spend an extra, probably an extra, 3.5, maybe 4 total hours in the air. You figure 3 hours down to Miami, probably another hour or 2 to get back up north. For half off, I'd probably do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You give me a half off ticket, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, I had
That's
a friend
also not how air travel works. Connecting flights are often more expensive than direct flights.
I know. I'm playing devil's advocate. I had a friend who
to save 50%, I would go out of my way. Yes.
I had a friend who flew. There was some crazy deal, and they flew, I believe, to Tokyo for like 2 days. It was literally, they were on the ground for 2 days. They were in the air longer than they were on the ground. It was some crazy fare, and he convinced a couple of his friends that the party starts the minute they get on the plane.
It can if you're on the right plane.
Well, I'm also going to say this. This is the other thing. The trip changes so much if you're flying business class. It really changes everything about the structure of that travel. So literally, if you're flying business class, it does start the minute you get on the plane because you're now encapsulated in luxury and a big chair, food, drink, whatever you want. You got movies. That is actually that. If I were on a business class or first class flight, it would be the best part of my week. Almost guaranteed. Well, yeah, I think it's the best part of everybody's week, except unless we're flying private. Oh, private. So now I assume have you flown on a private jet? No. Okay. And now here's the part where I make everyone hate you. Have you flown on a private jet? I have, to Vegas. I'll tell you what, that tarmac is hot. That Vegas tarmac.
Speaking of people, well, I guess if you think about it, I have flown on a private jet. I've flown on sports team charters. Does that count?
Yeah, that's not. No, it does.
It's not the same. No, it's not the same, but it is in a way a private jet.
It's no. Yeah, you know what a private jet is? Where there's a couch in it you can lay on.
Yes,
that's a private.
Yeah, I totally agree. But speaking of people who've gotten undeserved rewards for their lot in life,
here we go.
Tommy Tuberville is now a senator in the state of Alabama, and he is now, after being elected, receiving some scrutiny. Where he's had to, and by receiving some scrutiny, I mean he's been asked to answer basic questions into a microphone
about civics,
right? And Keith, he hasn't done great at it. No. So Tommy Tuberville, whose only claim to fame in Alabama is that he coached Auburn and was pretty mediocre at it, is now a United States senator. What does that say about the world we live in?
Well, it's interesting because and you do make a good point. This isn't even like Nick Saban was just elected.
Yeah,
like I mean. Right. I mean, I believe, he had a good year, right? He lucked into some talent, but he is by no means some kind of legendary coach, right? I mean, he's a mid-tier, SEC coach, right? Coached a really good school. He's not
even a guy who's like dedicated his life to Auburn. I mean, this is a guy who, as soon as he could, was off to the next job.
Carpetbagger, right? So exactly. So it's not like he's not a Bear Bryant type figure, although Bear Bryant obviously with Texas A&M, but he's well known as kind of a lifer at Alabama. So absolutely, there's nothing particularly kind of deep Alabama in this guy. He also, and I did not really know this because surprisingly I don't spend a lot of time deeply following one-sided Alabama senatorial races.
Yeah.
It seems like there's other things going on. So I did not know that he refused to debate Jeff Sessions or Jones, the sitting senator, the Democratic senator who won after a very interesting election where there was a scandal that kind of landed him in office. So he didn't debate once.
Pretty common in those deep red states because there's absolutely no benefit to.
But he didn't debate during the primary. And Jeff Sessions is something of a figure, so he refused to ever get out in front. So we really have never heard anything from the coach before we got there. I mean, he was able to ride this thing basically through a few ads, a couple War Eagles, and he's in office.
And the R next to his name because he's an Alabama.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And has never held anything. I mean, never been a school board administrator. Like never held anything. Right. Wasn't like some college coaches end up being like athletic directors or like big time ADs. Yeah, I don't believe he wasn't a college president. Like some of these, he really is not. We were just kind of going on good faith that he knew his business. It turns out he does not know what the three branches of American government are.
Correct. Yes.
What were some of the other things he got wrong? Oh, he thought that World War II, which apparently his father fought in, he thought this was to keep socialism out of Europe, when it was actually fascism they were trying to defeat.
Yes. Now, to his credit, they do both end in ism. And I certainly don't think he's in the minority of people in this country who think that if it ends in ism, it's exactly the same. Yep. But I mean, he's not the first.
By the way, my people strongly disagree with that.
Yes, yes, they do.
My people were clearly aware of the difference that was happening in Europe at that particular moment.
Yes, as well.
We would have welcomed socialism at that point. We would have welcomed subsidized healthcare. We would have welcomed all those things.
Tommy Tuberville is not the first sports figure to be in politics, right? Bill Bradley, Steve Largent, the list goes kind of on and on of sports figures that have been elected, and some of them, I mean, like those two have been quite good at their jobs.
Well, Bill Bradley is an intellect, as we all know, Princeton graduate. Absolutely. And look, Jack Kemp, right, quarterback. Sure. I mean, who's the Tennessee quarterback who went and the Tennessee quarterback, I'm blanking on names, who ended up running as a centrist Democrat and did fairly well. Sat in the House for a little while. It's fairly common, right? They have name recognition. A lot of them do understand leadership depending on what position they played. Lynn Swann didn't do well, but ran for office in Pennsylvania. You probably remember that. Didn't have a great run.
He didn't win. He didn't win.
No, he did not.
Terrible.
Really a terrible campaign he ran because you would have thought Lynn Swann, although the theory is the Eagles fans just refused to.
Yeah, there's a big voting block that won't vote for. Yeah.
You do figure if you're going to win statewide in Pennsylvania, it's a lot easier to do it if you're from the Philly side of the house than on the Pittsburgh side of the house. So I don't have any particular. Of course, Ronald Reagan seem to have played athletes,
not the
acting.
same. Not the same. No,
I understand. But there is a fair, Gerald Ford, but certainly has some athletic history. I know he was an athlete of sorts, not a professional athlete. There's a fairly strong history and legacy of athletes who then run for office of some sort. And certainly, if we trace back the number who were college athletes or high school athletes, I'm sure it would be overwhelming, right? Yeah. So I don't have any particular problem with it. I think now we're seeing certainly more activism amongst, political activism amongst athletes. And it begs the question, do you think some of the current NBA athletes, NFL athletes who are activists might consider running for office? My guess is no, because at some point they realize being in the Senate and making, $170,000 a year and going through the slog of having to listen to whoever the head of the Senate is set the agenda. At some point you're like, I could do a lot more with my life, affecting change and being happy and making money, not being in the Senate. So, I think a lot of athletes eliminate themselves right off the top because they're like, well, I have $80 million in the bank and I can kind of do whatever I want and have it, or I can go be the junior senator from South Dakota. So I don't have a huge problem with it. I do think, though, I think there's an issue when, and this is true for celebrities as well. It's not just athletes. When people are voting for someone like Tuberville simply because they held the position as a head coach, I think we really need to kind of distinguish what makes potentially a good head football coach and what makes a senator. And I do also believe that there was a certain irony that Tuberville came out very strongly and said, we need to really start paying attention to what they're teaching in schools now. History. Remember, he made that point. The guy doesn't know what World War II was. So, what are you going to say? It does seem problematic. But look, here's the other side of it. At some point, this is what politics is in America. It's D's and R's too, right?
Identity politics. Yeah. Name recognition and the side that you're on and the place that you're running. And as long as politicians pick their voters through gerrymandering and things like that, then it's going to continue.
You know who we'd like to see run? Speaking of athletes, you know who we'd like? And we'd ride this ticket.
Jack Ford.
Good. Oh yeah. Does he
we'd be fighting for cabinet positions. Which cabinet position do you think you're most qualified for?
Most qualified? That's different than like.
Let me put it to you a different way, because let's be honest, the cabinet position you're most qualified for is none of them. So which cabinet position would you lobby for most aggressively?
Chief of staff's not bad. Chief of staff's a good one.
Sure,
you're running buckshot on them. You're thinking of secretary.
Is chief of staff technically a cabinet position?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
I'm thinking more like secretary of blank.
Of the interior, right? Yeah. And I don't know the difference. You got to want secretary. I want secretary of state. That's the glory.
That's the top one. That's the top one. You talk about great travel and private planes. That's where you get it.
And you literally, you just go wherever you want. You're like, we really need to check out. We need to check out what's happening in Guam. Let's take a trip.
But do you want that one? Because there's a lot of scrutiny there, and there's a lot of real work that has to be done there too.
Treasury's probably good.
You always want to be the guy in charge of the money.
I'll tell you
along the same lines, let's not discount energy because you're in charge of the nuclear arsenal. That's a lot of power. There aren't a lot of people that are going to cross the guy in charge of the arsenal.
You also want who's going to be who's going to be what you want after this is the K Street, multi-million-dollar job. You want to slide into all the boards you can handle, right? You want to be on executive and energy. You're going to be on Exxon. You are getting set up for fame and riches on the back end of this, right? I'll tell you what you don't want to be. Agriculture. You don't want any part of it.
No. Oh.
Education. Nope. You don't want any part of that.
I will say right now, the bar for that particular position is on the floor.
It's a tough job, though. No one's happy with you.
Whoever gets in the Biden administration has a very low bar.
That's a tough one. So I would go Secretary of State is great. Is there something like the Secretary of State, like a deputy Secretary of State where you get all the travel, but none of the authority?
I'm sure there is. I don't think they just go by themselves. I'm sure there's a number two.
I would go. So you're right. I would go energy. Energy is where you're going to make the most money because that's in the end. You want to.
Yeah. Well, and the Treasury. I mean, Wall Street money.
Treasury is good too. And I'll tell you what. If you like power, I mean, I understand the nuclear bomb's a lot of power. Treasury, you're setting rates. You're setting rates.
And I got to tell, say what you will about.
You're like, you could buy a house now. You could buy a house now.
say what you will about the outgoing Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin. The one thing that he got a lot of hate for, and rightfully so, don't get me wrong, but that I would be hard pressed not to also do if I was in his position, would be taking the smarmy pictures, holding up the uncut sheets of money. like
how great does it feel to print money? Like how much?
Right. And I mean, here's where Steve Mnuchin went wrong. Right? I don't think anybody who's had that job hasn't taken that photo.
You just don't
publish it.
Yeah.
That
goes in the memoir.
You keep that one in the lockbox. Yeah. That's the one you put on the locked folder on the front of your computer. The folder just spreadsheets.
So Jack Ford, I'd like to. What other athletes would you like to see run for office?
It's a tough question. I mean, current athletes.
Bill Bradley was great. I was a big Bill Bradley fan.
I'm trying to think. I mean, like you look at a guy like, and this is tough because like you think current athletes of like the popular people that people know. You look at someone like Steph Curry, who seems to be relatively intelligent and also pretty altruistic.
Steph Curry's a great. So why not Steve Kerr if we're going down?
Sure. And that's why you start to think like current athlete Steve Kerr. You feel like he'd be good. I'd think a guy like Myron Rawl, who I don't know if you remember. He's
of course,
the cornerback,
Rhodes Scholar,
became a Rhodes Scholar, and is now a doctor. He's actually at the forefront of fighting COVID in Boston.
I don't think he wants to give that up. I don't think.
Yeah. You look at people like that and you think, I feel like those types of people. But I mean, what I'm most interested in my politicians are how they view the world, less so about their policy and what they would choose, because no one person has that much power in that respect. Yeah. Just give me someone who I think is reasonably intelligent and believes in fairness, and the rest of it will kind of work itself out.
I will tell you, when you are in like if you're at the University of Florida and you're up in like the Touchdown Terrace area in the suites, Florida State Day, every politician in the state, there's a lot. You want to smell money. You want to smell power and money.
Sure.
Well, we saw when we were at the Iron Bowl
in Alabama. Yeah.
You could feel the money and power. Like when you could feel it. You like that. You like to be around that, don't you?
Oh, it's great to be around the movers and shakers. It's great.
We don't get back. No, I do. I do. I like to have them on my Rolodex. We got to get on the road. We got to take, that's what we have to reward ourselves. So when this ends, and let me tell you what, the number I'm caring about right now, 94.5, the effectiveness of the Moderna vaccine. Give it to me now, doctor. I can take it. So, as soon as that's over, we got to take this show on the road. We got to take our computers and our Zooms and our lights and just do this in two separate parts of the room.
Next week, we're going to plan a trip that we're not going to be allowed to take for another 6 months. So that's what we got to think about for the next 6 days, because this episode of Sportish, it's in the books. For Keith and Mike, I'm Jeff. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.